Welcome to History and Politics with Dr. Brovkin. Today, my dear friends and subscribers and visitors to my channel, is a special edition because today is a very important day for hundreds of millions of people, and especially it is a holiday for Shia Muslims. Officially, the name of the holiday is Ashura, and it happens to be this year on the 25th, or in some places on the 26th of June 2026. It corresponds to the 10th Muharram 1448 by the Islamic calendar, and it is a commemoration of very dramatic and very bloody events that took place in the year 680 by Christian calendar. Now, this video describes in great detail the whole background of this event. This was the murder of Hussayn, the grandson of Calif Ali. This event is probably one of the most important ones in the history of Islam, and especially in the history of Shia. One can only compare it to the events surrounding the death of Jesus Christ for the Christians. So in one sentence, what you will hear today, it is that the grandson of Caliph Ali, Hussayn, was murdered. Now, and why it happened, who did it, and what's the sequence of event, this is what this video is all about, and I hereby invite you to listen to it. And if you have more interest, I have a playlist which is called Middle Eastern and Islamic History, and you can find it in the list of my playlists in my channel. Welcome. Eastern and North European history with Dr. Brovkin, and today's topic we have the rise of Shia movement, or the split of Islam, or the tragedy of Karbala. All of these are related topics. Now, we finished our story with the murder of Ali, and that's the beginning of another story. This is the beginning of the next chapter, which is probably the most dramatic and the most disturbing, bloody in the history of Islam and of Middle East. So Muawiyah, as you know, he inherits the throne in 661 on the grounds that Ali is dead, and he was ruled to be qualified, to be eligible to be the caliph by the arbitration, and so he sort of becomes caliph because there's no other candidate and because the court ruled that he could, in principle. So he rules for 20 years until 680, and in 680 he dies. And that is the beginning of the new crisis in Islamic world. Now he gives his power to his son. So that in itself, Yazid, his name is Yazid, that in itself is a new step, because by the rules, the new caliph would have to be elected. Now, Muawiyah wasn't elected, but there was an arbitration court that ruled that he's eligible. Now, by the rules of the game, there should be new elections. Well, he violates this rule and simply passes on his power to his son. So this becomes a dynasty. This becomes, pretty much no longer what Muhammad wanted, and the rules that were established after Muhammad's death. Now, by the fact that Yazid becomes a new caliph by inheritance, there's two sons that are still around. One is Hassan and the other Hussayn, the sons of Ali. The logic is that if the son of Muawiyah can inherit the throne simply because he's the son of Muawiyah, why could it not be that the sons of Ali, Hussayn, and Hassan could claim power too, because they are legitimate sons of a legitimate caliph, and therefore there are no worse credentials than the ones by Yazid. Now, Hassan actually wasn't interested. Rumor has it that he was paid by Muawiyah, and that would be quite in Muawiyah's character to bribe somebody. But whatever it may be, Hassan was not interested and didn't do anything. Lived a peaceful life in Mecca. But Hussayn was getting information from a lot of supporters of Ali in Kufa and in Basra and in southern Iraq, that if he came, he would be supported. There will be people who would be ready to claim the caliphate in his name because he is the son of Ali. So Hussayn thought, why not? And he decided to try. And he decided to move from Mecca to Kufa to go there and claim the power, at least in that region. And of course, Yazid had already sent his men and his governor to Kufa, and that meant that there's going to be a confrontation. So the most dramatic part of that story is in the place called Karbala, which is in southern Iraq, and this is the place where the two armies met. It's very important to say that it's not exactly an army. It was an army in a sense that Yazid sent an army, and they were about 1,000 armed men. And then there was Hussayn and his supporters, but they were not really an army. That they were basically Hussayn and his supporters, and included women and children and the whole lot of people who were relatives and sons and their friends. So it was less of an army on the Hussayn's side. And finally in Karbala they met, and there was a battle. That is known as the battle, but it's not a real battle in the sense that it was a battle in the sense that both sides fought. But it was more like a massacre because the Yazid's people were intent on destroying Hussayn at whatever cost. And first they tried to deprive them of access to the water, and then they wanted to attack them during the prayer. All the indications are that Yazid is anxious and that he's impatient to remove the competition, the person who could claim power from him, and that is Hussayn. Finally, they were all killed, and there are many dramatic descriptions. They were pretty much slaughtering women and children and everybody, with very, very few people who escaped. And it is one of the sons of Hussayn who asked permission to leave, and he did leave, did allow him to leave. And another woman, Fatima, escaped. But most of them, almost to a single person, were all killed. And this is why it's more known as the massacre at Karbala rather than the Battle of Karbala. So, if we look at it this way, this is a battle, and there were many battles in history, but somehow this battle becomes the crucial moment in the split that is going to occur among Islam followers. And this is the thing. They didn't think that what happened is going to create a new religion or a new branch of Islam. They thought this is a tragic encounter and it had devastating consequences. The reason being that every year after this, a new tradition was born. And those who were followers of Ali and Hussayn would come to Karbala to commemorate, to remember the blood that was spilled. And even now, I mean, that's hundreds of years later, on the 10th of October, every year, the Shia come to Karbala, and they have this procession, and it's called self-flagellation, which is very much like a medieval Christian rite, which is they beat themselves until blood is streaming all over them. That is to commemorate the murder of Hussayn and all his clansmen and all the people around him. So, in other words, what happened was that a massacre, there were many massacres in history, but this particular massacre created a tradition of mourning and regret and adoration of martyrdom that developed in itself into a religion, into a branch of Islam. So it was Fatima who went all over the Islamic world and spreading the word, saying a massacre had happened. They killed all of Ali's children. They destroyed everybody of Muhammad's bloodline. And you see, little by little, you have this crystallization of what would be the major ingredients of Shia, which is bloodline of Muhammad, Ali's children. They are special and they are sacred because they're martyrs. So the second idea is martyrdom. People who were killed for religion, who were innocent, and who were killed not in battle but in a massacre. So the idea of martyrdom and suffering becomes one of the key ideas of Shia Islam. And then already, if you read attentively letters of Ali, you could see that he is saying, we are special. Not like you Sufians. We are special because we come from his family, which means from Muhammad's family. So you have already from Ali, which was strengthened, the murder of Hussayn strengthened that idea that the bloodline of Muhammad is sacred and special. And therefore, those who are martyrs and who are of Muhammad's bloodline are inborn imams. And this is another new idea that was never that present up until moment in Islam. Imam is a teacher who has special qualities because he is of Muhammad's bloodline. So if you put all these together, this is a crystallization, step by step, of what actually turned out to be in Shia Islam. For Shia Islam, the idea of suffering is crucial. The idea of Imam, who comes from the bloodline of Muhammad, is crucial. The idea of salvation at the end of suffering is crucial. The idea of pilgrimage to Karbala, the place of suffering, is crucial. They still believe that there's one God and Muhammad their prophet. They still do, just like all other Muslims. But it's more than that. They kind of venerate or adore or feel compassion, and their souls are touched much more by the murder of Ali and the murder of Hussayn. And then, as we could see, you will later see, all other 12 generations, this is why they're called the 12ers, they were all killed, one after another, generation after generation. The Sunni leaders of Islam could not tolerate anybody who can claim to be an imam of Hussein's lineage, so they just kept killing them. And that even strengthened the idea of suffering and salvation by the Shia, and the split was final within 100 years. So the split did not occur overnight. There was no, if you ask somebody in Karbala in 680, are you Shia? They would have no idea what you're talking about. So it happened as a process. It happened as a crystallization of a new branch of Islam, similar to how Christianity developed out of Judaism, because Jesus didn't think he's a Christian. He thought he had a mission of salvation, and it's his followers who created Christianity. And it's the same thing with Shia. It's the followers of Hussayn. He didn't think he was doing anything other than claiming the power of his father's throne to be the Caliph because Ali was Caliph. That's all. He didn't think he's creating a new religion. But once he was killed, people who came next year to that place to simply commemorate his murder, they were the ones who created a new tradition, and that's how Shia crystallized. Now, that's not the end of the story. The movement in support of Shia, or in support of Hussayn and his followers, continued, and it grew even more. And the next page would be 2 years later, actually 3 years later, in 683. There's an uprising in Arabia, now the heartland of Islam, in Medina and in Mecca, by the people who are second generation of the followers of Muhammad. Zubair is the name, and his father was among those who went with Muhammad in all the battles and everywhere. So they also rebel against Yazid, because they just feel that Yazid is a usurper, and that he has no claim to power and shouldn't have any. And this is also extremely dramatic, because this is sometimes called Civil War number 2 in Arab history. You have fighting now, not in Kufa, not in Iraq, you have fighting in Arabia itself. Medina is besieged by Yazid's troops, by the Syrian troops, and so is Mecca. And in that fighting in Mecca, the Kaaba is damaged. And I don't know if it's true, but the rumor is that the sacred stone is split into two. And it's interesting that it's definite that it's damaged. How damaged, I don't know, but that's what some sources say. It's been split into two. But it's a very interesting idea. If you're religious, it should be very interesting to note that that same year when the sacred stone was damaged, Yazid dies. He just dead. He just died. It wasn't in battle. He just died. You know, religious people would say it's God's punishment for him for the attack on Mecca, and maybe for damaging the sacred stone. Whatever it may be, Yazid dies, and you have the civil war winds down, and finally his son Malik wins and restores order. But it still is just quiet for a while. The discontent will continue, especially in Arabia and especially in southern Iraq. There will be new rebellions, and in 751, some 70 years later, 60 years later, the new rebellion will succeed and the Umayyads will be overthrown. But we will discuss this at a later date as the beginning of a new dynasty, the Abbasid dynasty. And finally, I just want to have one conclusion. If you look at the actions of these people, what I find most striking is that they all considered themselves Muslim, and they all considered themselves followers of Muhammad, but they all violated what Muhammad taught. Muhammad taught there should not be any clan warfare, that Muslims are brothers. There should not be a war between Muslims, and that's exactly what they did. This is exactly what they did. From the moment of Muawiyah's conflict with Ali, and then it goes on to Yazid, and then it goes on to Malik. I mean, basically, you have continuation of the same kind of clan war as Muhammad himself faced against the Sufians. So one other way of looking at it, that the Arab tribes and clans never learned anything from Muhammad, and they continued to fight each other despite the fact that officially they professed to be good Muslims. And then the consequences were pretty bad. Civil war and split of Islam. And later on, the split of the empire. And the split can be felt to the present day. As you know, unfortunately, even today, we have a conflict among Sunni and Shia. You have bombs exploding in Shia places, and there are all kinds of radicals who hate each other, and that shows how important these events in Karbala were. And that will be it. Thank you.